MySQL users and privileges. How do we create users in MySQL or user accounts? The syntax is create user and then the account name identified by and then the password. Account name, the format for account name is usually the username at and then the host name. If host name is omitted, user can connect from anywhere. If specified, user can only connect from host name. If the username and host name contains special characters such as a space or dash or hyphen, you need to code the username and host name separately as follows. So username, so using code at host name. So we should use code. So here's the demo. So first, what we're going to do is to log in MySQL command line using root command. So as you can see, the command here is MySQL -u root -p. So we're logging in using the root user. So once you press enter key, it will ask us the password. So just enter the password and then that's it. You are now logged into the MySQL command line client. And then on step 2, you can show the current users. So how do you show current users? We just type select user from MySQL.user. So this will give us the user of the database. And then let us now create a user account. So again, the syntax is create user followed by the account name identified by and then the password. So in this example, we have create user and then we have here now the username at and then localhost, that's the host name, identified by and then the password. So for to simplify things, we just use the word password. Of course, not a very strong password. But after this, we have now created a user. So step 4, show all your users again. So we select user from MySQL user, and you notice here that the user jack is already added. And then let us try to open a second session and log into MySQL as Jack. So to do this, we have to open a new command window or CMD window. Then log in again as Jack. So once you open another command window, just type MySQL-ujack-p, and this will now prompt us to the password. And then the password, of course, our password was word pass. So just type word pass to log in as Jack. And then if you were logged in as Jack, so this is the second session, that's a Jack session. So you try to type show databases. And when you type show databases, you'll notice that we don't have any database yet except for the default database, that is a test database, and the information schema. Now let's go back to the first session, the root session. So create a new database and name it JackDB. So we have create database JackDB. Then select the database JackDB. So we're still on the root session, and create a table M with the following fields: ID integer 5. So that's integer 5, ename varchar 30, and salary double default 0. So we first use JackDB to be our default database by typing use and then JackDB, and then we create the table. So create table M, ID integer 5, auto increment primary key, ename, that's varchar 40, salary double default 0. So we have now created a table named M inside JackDB. And if you're going to open Jack session and show databases, still the JackDB cannot be accessed by Jack. So what we're going to do now for the root user is the root user is presumed to be the admin, the database administrator, to grant all privileges on the JackDB to Jack. So how do we do this? Grant all privileges on JackDB that asterisk. So this is the name of the database, and this means that all objects belonging to this database, then all privileges will be given to these objects to Jack. So let's go back to the Jack session and show databases. You'll notice now here that Jack now can have access to the JackDB database. And still under Jack session, we can now select the JackDB database. So use JackDB. So that means that will be the default database for Jack. And then show tables. You notice that the emp table now is shown here, and it can be accessed by the user Jack. Then insert a record to the emp table. So insert into emp, ename, salary, values, Daisy, and then 18,000. So after inserting, once you press enter key, we can now test select asterisk from emp, and it will show us that we have successfully inserted the record. So Jack here can insert. Actually, he can do anything, because if you remember, we have granted all privileges to Jack. So Jack can insert, delete, use the select statement, etc. So let's try to review again the grant privileges. The create user statement creates one or more user accounts with no privileges. So once we create a user, the user by default has no privileges. It means that the user accounts can log in into the MySQL server but cannot do anything such as select a database and querying data from tables. To allow user accounts to work with database objects, you need to grant the user account privileges, and the grant statement grants a user account one or more privileges. So the following illustrates the basic syntax of the grant statement. So we have done this a while ago, but this is the syntax. So grant privilege, comma privilege. So we have here the privileges on privilege level. So usually the privilege level is the objects, and then to account name. So that's the syntax. So for example, what if I have here, I want to grant a select privilege on the table emp to Jack. So grant select on JackDB.emp to Jack. So select here is actually, so select here, this one is the privilege, and this is the object. So that means that the user Jack, or we can place here Jack at host name or localhost, the user Jack has a select privilege on JackDB emp or emp table of the JackDB database. So what if you want to grant, insert, update, and delete privileges on the emp table to Jack? So the command will be grant, and then what are the privileges? He can insert, update, delete on what object? The JackDB emp. So if, say for example, we have other tables in the JackDB, then Jack maybe does not have the privilege to do this commands, or use these commands. So again, it's an example. Global privileges. So global privileges apply to all databases in a MySQL server. To assign global privileges, you use the asterisk syntax. For example, grant select on asterisk to Jack at localhost. So that means that Jack can have access on all database and all tables of all databases. Database privilege. What if we only give database privileges? So apply to all objects in a database. To assign a database level privilege, you use the syntax on database name dot asterisk. Of course, if you're going to review the previous one, wherein we have asterisk dot asterisk, in reality, it is quite not so secure to grant the asterisk that asterisk or the global privilege to just somebody else. So be sure that you only grant that privilege to authorized users. So in this case now, the database privilege will be assigning all of the objects inside that database. So let's say, for example, grant insert on jackdb dot asterisk. So that means that all tables in the jackdb, Jack here will have the insert privilege. We can also grant table privileges. So table privileges apply to all columns in a table, or maybe all rows. And to assign table level privileges, you use the on database name dot then table name. So as an example, we have here grant delete on jackdb.emp to jack at localhost. So we specify the name of the table. So again, in this example, Jack can delete all rows of the emp table in the jackdb database. So it can delete any row, or maybe even all rows of the emp table. We also have the column privileges. So the column privileges apply to single columns in a table. You must specify the column or columns for each privilege. Right? So example, grant select, then open parenthesis ename salary, comma, update ename on emp to jack at localhost. So in this example, the account name or the user Jack at localhost can select ename and salary, but he cannot select other fields in the emp table. And he can only update the ename column of the emp table of the default database, since it is not specified in this example. So you notice I did not specify the name of the database in my emp. So just to show you that if ever you do this, then that means you're referring to the default database, the currently selected database. We also have the stored routine privileges. So the stored procedures will be discussed maybe later on in other videos. So apply to stored procedure and stored functions. For example, grant execute on procedure, update salary to Jack at localhost. So that means that we have a stored procedure named update salary. So again, this one, so update salary here is the name of a procedure. So this command, so this grants Jack at localhost the privilege to execute the stored procedure name update salary. Again, since we did not specify the database, then that means we're referring to the default database. If we can grant privileges, we can also revoke privileges. The revoke statement revokes one or more privileges from a user account. So how do we revoke one or more privileges? So revoke privilege, comma, privilege on object type, privilege level from user 1, user 2, etc. So in this syntax, first specify a list of comma separated privileges that you want to revoke from a user account after the revoke keyword. Then second, specify the object type and privilege level of the privileges after the on keyword. So when you say privileges, you may specify the name of the database, the name of the table, or you may specify global objects or something. So check it out, the grant statement, for more information on privilege level. So we have actually done that a while ago. So third, specify one or more user accounts from which you want to revoke the privileges in the from clause. So there are three keywords: revoke, after revoke the privileges, on, then the object name, from, and then the users. So example, how do we revoke all privileges? So we can type revoke all, comma, grant option, and then from the user. So that's an example of revoking all privileges. So let's have a demo. So open the MySQL database using the root user. So you notice here, this is how we open. You can also place -p so that prompt word will be prompted, but in this example, this particular example, that means that the database have no password, or the root has no password. But of course, in reality, don't do that. And then using the revoke all privileges of JAK at localhost. So revoke all, comma, grant option. Actually, JAK does not have a grant option, but let's just try to do that, from JAK at localhost. So that means that all privileges of JAK was removed, was revoked. Then now let's create a session for JAK. So here we actually log in JAK, then here. So we have now logged in JAK. So on the root again, revoke the select privileges of JAK on JAK session. Again, if JAK has the access to the JAK database. So revoke select on JAK db.m from JAK localhost. So we notice here, if we show databases, JAK have no more access to the JAK database. Using JAK session, show the database. So yeah, here we have show databases, so have no privilege on JAK DB database. Then using the root user, grant select privilege to JAK, grant select on JAK db.m to JAK at localhost. So using JAK session, test if JAK can now access the emp table. So show databases. So here we have the JAK DB. Okay, let's try to have a live demo of creating users. So first, allow me to open one command line client. And then I'm going to open another, no, that's just the CMD rather. Another CMD. So I have here now two instances of CMDs, or command line, command window. Okay. So first, I'm going to log in as user. So I'm going to choose the path of my data, MySQL. So we have now logged in as the root user. So show databases. I have here the JAK DB database. Okay. Now I'm going to create a new user. So create user Jill at localhost identified by Jack and Jill. So let's play single quote. So I have now created a user named Jill at localhost. So once you create the user can already log in. So in the other session, allow me now to open another MySQL command line client. cd xampp MySQL bin. So MySQL, so dash u, my username now is Jill, and then dash p. So what's the password? Jack and Jill. Oh, so what's my password? Jack and Jill. Let's try to repeat. So I have here now logged in as Jill. So show databases. You notice I don't have any privilege on any database except the test database. So what I'm going to do, I'm going back to the root and grant a privilege to Jill. So let's say grant select on jackdb.emp to Jill at localhost. So what's the privilege granted to Jill? Only to select the emp table on the Jack database. Show databases. You notice here now that the JackDB can now be seen by Jill. So we can place a use JackDB and then show tables. So we now have the emp table on the emp table can be seen by Jill. So select asterisk from emp. So you notice that Jill can select on the emp table of the Jack database. But let's try to insert on emp ename salary values. For example, we have Mara, and then the salary is 15,000. Okay, so it says here, do you have an error in your syntax? Check the manual that corresponds and blah 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 blah. So insert I think sorry, my syntax was wrong. Insert into emp ename salary values. So I have here Mara and then 15,000. Yeah. So it says here the insert command is denied to user Jill. Why? Because if we're going to look at the privilege granted to Jill, it is only the select privilege. So Jill here cannot actually insert, even update or delete, only select. Let's try to revoke the select. So revoke select on jackdb.m from Jill at localhost. Then show databases. So you notice here now, select asterisk from M. So the privilege of Jill to select from the jackdb.m is now revoked. So that's an example of creating users, granting privileges, and revoking privileges.